Welcome back to our deep dive. Now, if you've been following the NPKB story, you know they were, well, skating on thin ice.
Oh, definitely. They were burning through that seed funding, and their entire future was basically riding on this one software modem idea.
An idea that needed a specific chip, an ASIC, which didn't actually exist yet in physical form.
Exactly. The NP144i chip, that crucial piece of silicon, was stuck. There was this huge supply chain mess with LG pushing delivery way back, dangerously close to the end of 1995.
Right, but somehow in the middle of all that uncertainty, Michael, the execution guy at NPKB, he actually managed to pull in, was it $350,000 in pre-orders?
He did, from Japan and Korea no less. But here's the kicker. Those orders were based only on this expensive, kind of clunky prototype board, the FPGA evaluation board.
Okay, wait, for listeners who aren't engineers, what exactly is an FPGA board? And how on earth did they convince serious distributors they weren't just selling, smoke and mirrors?
Right, good question. So think of the FPGA board as like a big, flexible, but really expensive test platform. It lets you try out chip designs before you commit to manufacturing the final, cheaper ASIC.
So it worked, but it wasn't the real product.
Not at all. It proved the technology, the concept, was sound. Selling based on that was, honestly, pretty audacious. What really sealed those early deals wasn't the board itself, though.
What was it then?
It was the paperwork. Michael had insisted on these incredibly rigorous technical validation reports from the Japanese distributors, like really detailed testing.
So independent proof.
Exactly. Those reports basically said, look, this software modem architecture, it actually works, it delivers. That gave them credibility, even without the final chip.
Okay, so that sets the stage, our mission for this deep dive. How did Michael and the team leverage that proof, those reports, and that working prototype to turn a near disaster with the chip delay into, well, real industry recognition?
And not just recognition, but getting that critical first big order, stabilizing the finances, and even making some tough calls on management. This is really where the technical genius of Lucas and Alex crashes into Michael's hard-nosed business reality.
The tension must have been incredible.
Immense. But so was the opportunity if they played their cards right.
Let's dig into that first big play, landing the design win. Michael knew prototype pre-orders wouldn't cut it long-term. He needed a major stamp of approval. He needed IBM.
Specifically, IBM's Options and Accessories Group. Getting a design win from a giant like IBM, it's not just about the initial order size.
The validation, right. I mean, IBM officially says, yes, we're putting your component into our products.
Precisely. It's like a market baptism. But, and this is the crucial part, they had to pitch this to IBM while knowing their actual mass market chip, the NP144i ASIC, was still delayed.
Okay, hold on. That sounds like a massive red flag for IBM. If the final chip is delayed, how can NPKB guarantee they can actually scale up and deliver? That's a huge risk for IBM.
Absolutely. That's the core challenge they faced. So the team, Michael, Lucas, Alex, they had to sell IBM on three key things to overcome that perceived risk.
What were they?
First, cost. The NPKB design was revolutionary because it offloaded a lot of the work to the PC's own processor, the CPU. This meant huge savings for IBM, potentially cutting component costs by like 50% compared to traditional modems.
50%? Wow. Okay, that gets attention.
Definitely. Second, the small size, the form factor, always attractive. And third, crucially, they didn't just make promises about performance, they slapped down those Japanese technical reports.
The independent validation again.
Exactly. Those reports acted almost like a third-party guarantee. They showed the underlying design was solid and would perform just as well, maybe even better than the big players like Rockwell, even once it was on the final ASIC.
So they were basically selling future cost savings backed by present technical proof and convenience. The FPGA board must have performed really well in the demo, too.
It did, impressively so. And IBM, well, they bought it. They placed the order. That was the design win.
That's huge for a startup basically running on fumes.
Transformative. It instantly shifted them from being this, theoretical company with a cool idea to a validated supplier chosen by IBM. That kind of credibility, you just can't buy it.
So Michael has the IBM win. He hasn't paused, does he? What's the next move?
No time to waste. He immediately takes that IBM validation and pivots. He needs volume, scale, and that means Taiwan.
The manufacturing hub for PC stuff back then.
The epicenter. If you wanted PC peripherals made, you went to Taiwan. And this leads us to another critical negotiation, this time with Steve, the boss of a major manufacturer called CTB.
Okay, so another big fish.
Right.
Was Steve receptive?
He was Interested, but also skeptical. Steve was an old hand in the industry, a manufacturing guy. He understood production, costs, logistics. But the deep tech, the complex digital signal processing, the DSP stuff MPKB was doing...
Wasn't clicking.
Right. Michael was showing him specs, talking about the architecture, but Steve was kind of lost in the engineering jargon. He didn't quite get why MPKB's approach was so different, so much better.
So Michael needed a different angle, not just tech specs.
Exactly. He realized he had to translate the technical wizardry of Lucas's design into something Steve, as a business strategist, could really grasp. And he came up with this brilliant analogy.
The famous music analogy.
That's the one. He compared data transmission over phone line to music. He said, look, most modems are like basic listeners. They hear simple tones like single notes.
Okay.
But NPKB's DSP technology, it was like having expert musicians on both ends of the line who could play and, more importantly, discern really complex chords all at the same time over that same noisy phone line.
So it wasn't just about speed. It was about complexity and clarity.
Yeah.
Handling more information more reliably.
Precisely. It communicated the robustness, the inherent technical superiority. Steve suddenly got it. He understood why this tech could deliver better performance and the low-cost miracle they were promising. It wasn't just smoke and mirrors. There was deep tech behind it.
And that analogy sealed the deal.
Big time. It didn't just convince CTB to enter the modem card market using NPKB's chips. Steve was so impressed, he personally committed $300,000 as an investment.
Wow, a personal investment from the manufacturer. That's serious commitment.
Huge validation. And Michael didn't stop there. He helped CTB hire a technical director, George Chen, to make sure the integration went smoothly.
Building the partnership.
Right. And he kept hammering that dual strategy. Top-notch quality, married to aggressive cost control. He specifically focused on making sure NPKB's ASIC worked perfectly bundled with the necessary codec chip.
What's the codec?
Basically the chip that handles the analog to digital conversion for the phone line. Michael made sure they could bundle their ASIC and the codec efficiently to maximize the profit margin for partners like CTB. It was all about making it easy and profitable for them to adopt NPKB tech.
Smart. A win-win strategy.
Exactly. Mutual success.
Okay, so externally, things are suddenly looking amazing. IBM validation, huge Taiwan orders rolling in, personal investment from a key partner. This must have made finding institutional funding much easier.
Oh, absolutely. While Michael was conquering Asia, the founders back home were working on securing venture capital. And that IBM win, that CTB deal, it was perfect timing.
Then he landed it.
They did. They secured investment from KW Technology Venture Capital. This was crucial. It finally solved that persistent early funding crisis. They now had a proper financial runway, enough capital to actually fund mass production once those ASIC chips finally arrived.
Breathing room, finally.
A real safety net. But, sometimes getting money, achieving that security, doesn't solve all problems. Sometimes it highlights existing ones.
You mean the internal dynamics? Specifically with the CEO, Kyler.
Yeah. It seems that as the company shifted from just trying to survive to suddenly dealing with rapid growth and success, the leadership focus diverged.
That's how.
While Michael was still laser-focused on execution, delivering on those IBM and CTB promises, getting product out the door, but Kyler, our sources suggest his focus shifted more internally towards consolidating his own position. Things like personal power, control, maybe even profit, rather than purely on smooth operations or, shared leadership.
Oof. That sounds like exactly the wrong time for internal politics. They need everyone pulling in the same direction.
You'd think so. It definitely created unnecessary friction, especially for Michael, who was just trying to execute on the massive external commitments they'd just made. The pressure was on.
So the external success was kind of shining a spotlight on internal leadership issues.
Precisely. And that need for tight execution, for reliable performance across the board, led to another necessary correction, this time in the U.S. market.
Right, because despite the wins in Asia, the U.S. market was kind of flat.
Yeah, it was lagging pretty badly. The performance under the existing U.S. lead, Jin Fagan, just wasn't cutting it. It was stagnant compared to the explosion happening in Asia.
So another tough call.
A very tough call. Michael and Lucas, as key founders focused on results, reviewed the situation. They decided they couldn't afford a weak link in such a critical market, not now.
And Jin Fagan was let go.
Yes, the founders made the decision to dismiss him. It sounds ruthless, especially right after landing IBM, But they felt it was necessary. They needed top-tier execution everywhere to capitalize on the momentum.
That must have sent ripples through the company. Dismissing a key leader just as things are taking off.
It did. But it also signaled something important about the company's evolution, about the culture Michael was helping to build, despite the friction with Kyler.
What did it signal?
A shift towards maturity, maybe. The early days were often chaotic. Lucas had a temper. Kyler's planning wasn't always there. Michael brought a different energy, more orderly, more focused on process, compliance, accountability.
So performance over politics, at least in this instance.
It seems so. This move showed they were willing to prioritize results and build a scalable, disciplined structure, even if it meant making difficult personnel changes.
Okay, so NPKB has navigated this incredibly tricky turning point. They went from near death, based on a delayed chip, to landing IBM, securing funding, locking down Taiwan, and even tightening up management. They're no longer just a promise.
That sums it up perfectly. They're now a credible, funded player with a major design win and, crucially, starting to build the internal discipline needed to handle growth.
But here's the final twist you mentioned. Even with all these orders, all this investment.
Right. The actual money, the revenue from selling the final product with the NP144i chip inside, it still hadn't hit the books. They were still waiting for those ASICs from LG to actually start shipping and invoicing. That first dollar of operating revenue wouldn't be booked until mid-1995.
So the ultimate proof, the profitability, was still just around the corner. What happens next for NPKB? Where does this momentum take them?
The next phase we'll cover is growth, or maybe even epiphany. The orders keep coming, yes, but Michael steps up again to lead a major product launch that finally gets them significant attention in the U.S. media. This solidifies their position beyond just Asia. And, importantly, the company finally starts seeing real revenue flowing in.
And as they entered that growth phase, Michael instilled a core principle, didn't he? Something beyond just the tech or the deals.
He did. It's this idea of thriving in adversity, 生于忧患. He constantly reminded the team that success today doesn't guarantee anything tomorrow, especially for a fast-growing company. Meaning you always have to be vigilant, always strengthening things internally, processes, teamwork, and always pushing harder externally in the market. You can't get complacent. This turning point was vital, but the campaign that truly defined NPKB's success, Michael's most brilliant work, was really just beginning.
It makes you think, doesn't it? If your core product, your main asset, was suddenly taken off the table by delays, what else do you have? What proof, what credibility could you leverage to keep moving forward?
That's the question. Sometimes your biggest strengths aren't the physical things you sell.